We're looking at a book called Umdatul Talib. This is by the great Imam Mansur ibn Yunus al-Buhuti. This is a kind of a beginner level book, if you will. But I'm sure that we're going to find it quite robust when we couple it with the explanation of that book, Hidayat al-Raghib, which is by one of the greats, Imam Uthman ibn Ahmad al-Najdi. So we'll begin looking at the chapter of fasting. And essentially what we're talking about tonight is the obligatory nature of fasting, who's obliged, who's recommended to fast, who is recommended to abandon fasting, and for whatever particular reasons, as well as how to start the month. And this is always a soap opera among the various communities. So the Imam, he begins and he says, fasting the month of Ramadan is obligatory upon the sighting of the crescent of the month. So fasting, of course, linguistically fasting, it means sawm, it means al-imsak, which means to abstain from anything. Essentially, someone that is not talking is also considered someone who is sa'im, fasting, if you will, or abstaining in this way, abstaining from speech. You can find this in chapter Maryam, verse number 26. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawma. This is Maryam saying, alayhi salam, I have vowed to the most merciful abstention. Basically, she went on to say that I will not speak to anyone. Legally, the word sawm, it means imsakun bi niyyatin an ashya'a makhsusatin, basically to abstain from particular things with an intention to do so during a very particular time from a particular person. And this is the fasting that we know and are performing during Ramadan. It's where we are refraining from certain things, food, drink, intimacy, etc. And we're doing that for a specific time, right from the morning from Fajr until the evening at Salat al-Maghrib. And it's from particular people, those that are actually obliged to do that, and that's what we're talking about. Ramadan, believe it or not, was obligated in the second year of the Hijrah calendar. The great Imam Ibn Hajar, he said it was obligated in the month of Sha'ban. And so the Prophet ﷺ fasted 9 Ramadans, according to the consensus of the scholars. So he was able to complete 9 entire Ramadans, the remainder of his life. The Imam, he says that it's obligatory upon sighting of the crescent. The crescent, of course, is, we know, the birth of the new moon. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ, that whoever witnesses shahada, whoever witnesses among you the month, then they are to fast. And also, it was reported by the Prophet ﷺ that he said, Sumu li ru'yati, that you should fast, or you are to fast upon sighting it, wa aftiru li ru'yati, and you are to break your fast upon sighting it. So the fast, of course, he's talking about when you see the crescent of Ramadan, and breaking the fast is done when you see the crescent of Shawwal. And this was a command both from Allah and from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Imam mentions here as like a little footnote, as a little benefit here, it's preferred that you say Shahru Ramadan as opposed to Ramadan, the way that you address the month, if you will. And that's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said Shahru Ramadan in the Quran. This very verse that I just mentioned, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 185, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Shahru Ramadan, alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran, to the end of the verse. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Shahru Ramadan. Like I said, it's a little footnote, it's a little nuance. So it's preferred to say Shahru Ramadan, but it's permissible when talking about and discussing the month to simply say Ramadan. He goes on here and he says, if it is not seen in the clear night sky of the 30th, fasting is not commenced. So this is obviously before Ramadan, which is what month? Sha'ban, right? So if on the 30th night, which means the next day could potentially be the 30th or the 1st of Ramadan, if it's a clear night sky and the crescent is not seen, and the crescent is seen just before Salat al-Maghrib, that's when the window of opportunity to see the birth of the new moon, that crescent is just minutes before Salat al-Maghrib. And essentially what happens is as the sun, this is the sun here, and this is what the crescent would be, as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, the new moon crescent can be seen somewhere in the vicinity of the sun as it's setting, and it also sets below. So you have a couple minute window, 3, 4, 5 minutes, in order to see the crescent of the new moon. And so this is when you would determine whether or not it's going to be Ramadan or not. And so here, pay attention carefully. He says, in the clear night sky of the 30th, if you don't see it, the fasting is not commenced. If, however, its place of rising is obstructed by clouds, dust, etc., it is obligatory to fast with the intention of Ramadan as a precautionary ruling, which will suffice if it becomes apparent. So now we're talking about, we're getting ready to determine whether or not Ramadan, so we completed the 29 days of Sha'ban, and now we could potentially complete 30 days, or we could begin Ramadan. Okay, so the end of the 29th day, we go out and we start to look for the crescent of the Ramadan moon, but it's dusty, or the atmospheric conditions don't allow us a clear sight to the horizon. It's clouds, it's rain, it's something, smog, fog, whatever it may be. And we're unable to see whether there's a crescent or there's not. And so, in this case, the Imam, he says, it's obligatory that you fast. And this is with the intention of it being Ramadan. And all of the various rulings associated with fasting are applicable in this case. And so a person fasts as a precautionary ruling, and this will suffice in the event that it becomes obvious that it is actually Ramadan. All right? So there's some evidence that's used here, because this is a unique opinion. This is, I believe, considered min mufradat al-madhab, the unique opinions of this particular school. Many would say, well, you know, this is what we consider the day of doubt, which is prohibited. The day of doubt in the madhab is the first scenario when the sky is clear and you don't see the crescent moon. If you were to fast the next day, that's considered yom shek, and it's makruh. It's disliked to fast. But when it's cloudy out, there's something that has to be considered. And this, of course, is the opinion of a number of the companions. One of those, Umar, his son, Abdullah ibn Umar al-Khattab, Amr ibn al-As, Abu Hurairah, Anas, Muawiyah, Aisha, Asma, both the daughters of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. And this was due to the Prophet ﷺ saying, إِنَّمَا الشَّهْرُ تِسْعَةٌ وَعِشْرُونَ يَوْمًا. The month is 29 days. فَلَا تَصُومُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْا الْهِلَالَ. Do not fast until you see the crescent. وَلَا تُفْطِرُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْهُ. And do not break your fast until you see it. فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَاقْدَرُوا لَهُ. And if it becomes obstructed, then فَاقْدَرُوا لَهُ. And this is where there's a difference of interpretation here. Some may say it means calculate the days, continue to 30 days. But here, the interpretation according to Abdullah ibn Umar, he says that if 29 days have passed, that he would send somebody to go look for the hilal, the crescent. And if he saw it, then Bismillah. But if he did not see it, and there was nothing blocking the vision, then they would break the fast, meaning they wouldn't start the fast the next day. However, if on the horizon there were clouds or there was dust, then they would fast the next day. And the reason for that is because the meaning of, here in this particular hadith, he says, فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ. The meaning of this word, it means to constrict. ضَيِّقُوا. ضَيِّقُوا. Meaning you constrict the month to 29 days and not 30 days. And you will recognize this very meaning of the word in Surah Al-Fajr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَبَتَ لَهُ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ. Right? And if he were to test him, فَقَدَرَ, there's the word, قَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ, and restrict his provisions, then he would say, my Lord has humiliated me. So this very word, some use it to mean calculate, but in reality it means to constrict or to confine. So in this case, we're going to constrict and confine the month to being 29 days, and therefore, because it was cloudy out, we're going to fast the next day, and this is hukman dhanniyan. It's a precautionary ruling with the intention of Ramadan, which will suffice us in the event that we actually find out that it is Ramadan. So all of the various rulings apply. That means that you'll pray Taraweeh that night. Right? You didn't see the crescent because the cloud's out, and you're going to fast the next day out of a precautionary measure. You're going to also pray Taraweeh that night. It also means that a person that did not fast or did not have the intention to fast that day, if you find out it was Ramadan, guess what? They have to make it up. Whereas the one that fasted with the intention as a precautionary measure is sufficient. And their bases are covered. Is that clear? Pretty clear. Here we talk about the nature of moon sightings a minute. He says if it is seen in one region, everyone is required to fast. So the madhab is a proponent of international moon sighting as opposed to a local. And this is kind of a minority opinion of local moon sighting. International moon sighting here, the Imam, he says that if it's seen in one place, في بلد لزم الصوم جميع الناس. Everyone else has to fast because the Prophet ﷺ said, Sumu liru'yatihi. Fast when the crescent is seen and break your fast when it is seen. And this is a general address, an address which is for all of the Muslim Ummah. So if it's seen in one part of the world and the sighting is in accordance with what we're getting ready to talk about, then everyone else has to fast after that. And he says here, fasting is commenced with the witness of one upright person, regardless if they are a bondservant or a female. So Ramadan is rather unique in the way that it is welcomed, the witnessing of that month. Ramadan, starting it, only requires one. All of the other months, they require two to start it, including Shawwal, which means to end Ramadan, you have to have two witnesses, whereas to begin Ramadan, you're only required to have one. But the witness there are some qualities. They have to be adl, means they have to be upright. They have to have an acceptable level of religiosity. And if it's somebody that's a clear sinner, very disobedient type, rebellious sinner, not like, a righteous person that falls into sin, but somebody that's, could, say something and you can't trust them because of their sinful ways, right? So the person has to be rather upright, and they have to be morally responsible, has to be mukallaf, meaning they have to have reached the age of puberty and be of sound mind. And of course, if news reaches that one person has seen the crescent, and they are of this caliber, then we are to accept that witness, and we are to begin fasting. And it doesn't matter whether they're free or whether they are male or female, bondservant or freeman, male or female, both are acceptable in this case. It says fasting, if the fast was performed due to a single witness or due to clouds for 30 days, and the crescent was not sighted, the fast is not to be broken. Essentially what that means is we're going to take into account a misstart or a false start. So he says if it was just one witness, or we started fasting because of the clouds on the horizon, and then we completed 30 days. We know that 30 days is you're going to max out the month in 30 days. But if you don't see the moon on the 30th day, it's an indication that we had a false start, meaning that one witness just got it wrong. It's highly unlikely that two would get it wrong, but one could potentially make a mistake, or that when we saw the clouds and we did that precautionary measure, we were wrong. And what's going to happen? We don't break the fast because we did not see the crescent moon. The Prophet ﷺ he says, do not break the fast until you see the crescent moon, which potentially means that we could fast 31 days, and then we'll see the crescent moon, and then we will break our fast in that case. It says, whoever cites it and it is rejected, or cites the crescent of Shawwal alone, must fast. Essentially meaning that their shahada, their witness, was rejected for whatever reason, and that's happened throughout history, or they were alone without a second person to corroborate their witness. They can't break their fast. They have to continue to fast. It says, if it is confirmed in the day, it must be fast and then made up, just like one who reaches puberty, embraces Islam, concludes a menstrual cycle or postpartum bleeding, or returns from a trip in which the fast was broken. So check this out. If in the middle of the day, we didn't sight the moon the previous night, we didn't take any precautionary measures, but then in the middle of the day, we wake up and find out, hey, they sighted the moon over such and such place. We have to fast the rest of the day. So like we woke up at like 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. news reached us that, you know what, they sighted the moon. That means it's Ramadan. We can't go, oh, well, it's not convenient for us. We'll start tomorrow. One last lunch, one last supper, and we'll cut. No, it's Ramadan, which means you can't eat in Ramadan. So you have to begin fasting, and then you'll have to make up that day. And that's why it's important to be patient the night before, when you could potentially have a moon sighting. And so, practically speaking, in our current location, we have a large part of the world that we can wait throughout the daylight hours, but then we have a little bit of the world left that we need to wait and listen to see, is there going to be a moon sighting or not? So that we can avoid the disaster of waking up and hearing that, well, guess what? They saw the moon an hour away. We weren't patient enough to wait. We went to sleep. We woke up. We had breakfast. We turned on the TV. We looked at the news. Facebook's going Ramadan Mubarak. And now we're stuck. We're going, oh, it's actually Ramadan. And then we find ourselves having to change. Oh, I'm taking local moon sighting this time. Last year I did international because I went with Saudi. This year it didn't. I didn't catch it on the right time, so I'm going to do a local thing. Or, you know, that requires a little bit of patience. And the Imam here is pointing that very thing out. That if it is confirmed in the day, it must be fasted and then made up, just like one who reaches puberty. So here he mentions a number of other cases. That, for example, a kid who's not of age yet, if in the middle of the day they reach puberty, right? A young girl, she has her menstrual cycle. Or a boy, he has the various different signs of puberty that become apparent during the day. Guess what? He's now accountable. He's mukallaf, or she's mukallafa. That means they have to fast from that moment in order to complete the day. Or someone that enters into Islam. They embrace Islam in the middle of the day. Well, guess what? Ahlan wa sahlan, jazakallah khair for joining Islam. And now we begin you with fasting. You have to fast. Or concludes a menstrual cycle for a woman. For example, she finishes that, or her postpartum bleeding, it concludes. She has to fast the rest of the day. It's not like, well, I missed half the day, so I'm going to keep eating and drinking throughout the rest of the day. No, there's a sanctity in Ramadan that you're not permitted to eat and drink during its daylight hours, regardless the case. And then lastly, a person that returns from a trip while the fast was broken. So if you were traveling and you actually returned home in the daylight hours, you were on a journey in which you broke your fast, and then you got home and you got 3, 4, 5 more hours to go. Just because you were eating in the car on the way home, by the time you get home, no more eating, no more drinking. And it should be noted that if you as a traveler know you're going to get home during the day, you're required to fast that day. If you know, like, look, my journey's 4 hours down the road, I'm going to leave early in the day, I'm going to get home by noon, you need to fast that day. You need to fast that day because you know you're going to be obliged to fast when you arrive. So it's almost like, you know, you're a resident of sorts. It's recommended here. Now we're talking about people that were recommended. He says to become accustomed to it, the capable young are ordered to do it. Essentially, our kids, you know, when they get to the age of some level of capacity and capability, we should command them to fast in order that they become accustomed to fasting. They're obliged to fast when they reach puberty, as was just discussed. However, in order to get them ready and prepared, you need to begin them at a young age, when they're able. And sometimes it's good to begin them with portions of the day. Start fasting at Dhuhr, for example, and let them fast the rest of the day. Or let them fast from Asr until the rest of the day, and then let them have the iftar and all that type of a thing. And as they grow older, you increase that until eventually it becomes a habit and they don't have any problem adopting it as part of their worship routine.